Hi team. Hi team. Hi folks. Hold on one sec. I just started this video and I'm doing it wrong already. Thanks for holding. Your call is important. Sorry. We're gonna do a video. I'm gonna do a video and you're gonna watch a video, or I assume you are, about my keyword deck experiment. So at the beginning of September, I made a video about how I was going to. Probably should have done this as a face video. Now that I'm thinking about this, but also I've been sick, so I feel sort of mangy. So anyway, we're gonna do it this way, and that's gonna be how we do it. So anyway, back in September, beginning of September, made a video about how I was gonna do a month of reading only with decks that had keywords on them because I don't like that. So this goes back to something I always tell folks in my books and that I tell folks in my classes. If you don't like something, there's nothing wrong with that, but spend some time with why. Explore why, because there might be something in there that you can learn about yourself, or maybe it has something to teach you that you weren't expecting. So I think that's a good rule. It was something a teacher in undergrad taught me. And I think it's valid, right? Like, don't just say you don't like something. Spend some time exploring why you don't like it. So with that in my mind, and just, I don't know why, I something prompted me to do this other than that, but I can't remember what it was. But anyway, I decided I'm going to spend a month working with just decks that have keywords on them. Nothing else. And I did. And it turned out to be one of the slowest tarot months I've ever had. September was a bad month in a lot of ways. It was a weird month in a lot of ways. And I had very few clients. In fact, I did have some, but my microphone. Ugh. Just everything is so annoying. What was I saying? I don't even know. September was a weird month. I don't remember what made this happen. I don't even know what the hell I was saying. You're tipping over now, too. Yeah, let's come back down to earth. I am recovering from being sick and also preparing to go on vacation, so, it's a whole thing. So anyway, decided to work only with keyword decks, and I don't remember what prompted me to do that, but I did. And if you watch my introductory video from the beginning of the month, I talked about why, and these two decks were the ones that I was going to work with. And this is the Voyager Tarot by James Wanless, and this is the Sun and Moon Tarot by Vanessa Descordes. I also did a few things that I have never done or haven't done since I started reading that they tell you should do to bond with your deck. So I slept with this one under my pillow for 3 nights. This one I did one night because it just was too big to sleep with, which sounds weird. And I have to tell you, that had absolutely no impact on the readings at all. I had no better readings with these two decks than I did with a deck I just tore open with my teeth and slammed onto the table. I have to admit, I think I'm not magical. Like, I've been doing some work around spell work and stuff. Nothing's worked. I don't, have spirit guides. I don't feel like any like callings. I've been searching for 40 plus years for, spirituality, and I think I am a dud when it comes to spirituality and magic. Somehow I managed to read tarot cards really well, and I guess I just have to live with the fact that that's my only witchy gift. So there we go. Anyway, yes, he sometimes feels sorry for himself for not being cooler. I did not have I detected no more connection to the cards, no more magic, no more inspiration than I ever do having bonded with these two decks in that way. And I have personal decks that I've used that I have sort of consecrated with incense and stuff, and it's very hit or miss with whether or not they want to talk to me. So I don't know. It might just be me. Like I said, might be a dud. Um, I did spend a lot of time with this deck shuffling it. And I have to tell you, if you watched my introductory video, I thought this shuffled better than my first copy, my sort of 20-year-old copy, but not much. This deck, it's not going to do it now. I have to say, after shuffling this a lot, it's broken in really nicely, and I've come really to enjoy it. It's almost one of my favorite decks to shuffle now. So soothing. I don't know why. So despite the fact that it's glossy, I just find it very satisfying to shuffle. It's not a fast shuffle, but there's something about that I like, because I am a rusher. And so taking my time with some things is very helpful. So let's shuffle it one more time. Sometimes I want to do ASMR, like tarot ASMR, but I just don't have that kind of energy. What else? So yeah, bonding with the decks in that way did nothing. So if you're a new reader and you're watching this and you're like, should I sleep with my deck under my pillow? If you wanna, I think learning how to read effectively is probably going to treat you better in the long run. I love both of these two decks, and I think the big thing that came out of this experiment is that I love both of these decks. And I think, there's a reason that I landed on these two. If someone said to me, Ben, you have to work with only one deck for the rest of your life, and it has to be one of these two, I would be okay with that. No, I would miss and have missed all my cool decks, especially as we're now in October and it's spooky season, and I've got a lot of sexy spooky decks, which I'll be using. But I just by using these a lot, bonded with them. I also took James Wanless has a kind of class on his website, which was on sale, coincidentally, and so I took his class on the deck, which I have to say, there's a lot of resources about the Voyager deck. If you have any curiosity about it, James Wanless has certification courses in it, classes in it, PDF guidebooks and physical guidebooks, all of them exploring different aspects of this deck. One thing that you can say about this deck is that a lot of work went into it. They spent 4+ years creating the collage. It's very intentional. And to me, it actually feels so much like the Marielle. Not the Marielle. I can't read with that deck at all. The Margareta Peterson. It just gives a similar kind of... What I love about that deck, the Margareta Peterson, is it's right here. Totally off topic, no keywords on it. There's just something really inspirational about the images. And so I have all of my foundational tools, my elements, my keyword, my numerology, keywords, etc. But then there's just this scrying space, as it were. And I feel like this deck offers sort of scrying space. The scrying game, that's not appropriate. That's a fucked up movie. Tarot ASMR, asynchronous, and making no sense. I did also take an edible a minute ago. Sorry. And I like that about this deck. This deck has always, to me, sort of been on the edge of feeling a little more like an Oracle deck. But I don't feel that way anymore, having worked with it so much. And again, I did not do a lot of readings, which meant that I did more readings for myself than I usually do. Just to, again, get the cards working, which I also will do when I, am not doing something like this and haven't read in a while, just to keep the muscle sharp. It's like playing scales on the keyboard. Now, I don't play the keyboard, so I'm assuming that that's what that's like. A thing that I like about the design of this deck is actually because the borders are fairly light and the text is white, it's actually a little harder to, or easier to miss the keyword. Now, the problem that I always had with reading with keywords is that they jump out at me before anything else. Excuse me. I'm very linguistic. I'm a writer. I live in my head. I'm very swordsy. And so words tend to stick with me in a way other things don't. And so I can look at the Woman of Worlds, which in this case would be the Queen of Coins or Pentacles. But the first thing I see is her keyword, Preserver. And the Two of Wands, Purity. And because these decks or this in particular deck, does not have sort of traditional icon images, and by iconic, I mean sort of smithy. It's it's easier for me to say, well, this is the purity card, like in an oracle deck, and then I kind of come to the fact that, oh, it's the Two of Wands, and then, oh, there's something going on in the image, you know. And so I tried to make this video earlier, and I did kind of an interesting example with this deck that I'm going to cut in here, because I thought it went well, and I re-recorded it because there were some things in the intro that I wanted to say. So at this point, you're going to cut over to me yesterday, I think, or the day before, and I'm a little sicker, but a little clearer, and so you'll get that experience, which will be just more me for you, and that's good for all of us. So, as I always say at the end of my videos, take care, be good, and we'll talk soon. So what did I learn? What was this experience like? Well, I learned a couple things, and the experience was pretty positive. I have to say, both of these decks I've become very fond of. I think they are absolutely going to be decks that are in the regular rotation, and I realized I only have one of my lights on. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Yeah, so I really like both of these decks. I found it actually somewhat easier to work with the keywords in the Sun and Moon deck because it's not that I liked the keywords more. Actually, I think the keywords in this deck are much more useful. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Kind of from just a modern standpoint, you know what I mean? I think that they, reflect, certainly this deck was created in the 80s, but, a lot of work went into this. 4 or 5 years, I think, the artist and the creator, James Wanless, in working on these cards. The reason I think I found it easier to work with the keywords on the Sun and Moon deck is because I'm used to the images on the Waite Smith deck. And really what Pamela Coleman Smith was doing was drawing the words that the Golden Dawn associated with the cards. So the Thoth keywords that we're familiar with are more or less what Pamela Coleman Smith was illustrating, which is the thing I don't hear people talk about very much. But that seems very clearly what she was doing to me. Anyway, because I'm used to ignoring the images on the Waite Smith cards, I was more used to ignoring the keywords on this deck. These keywords are their own thing. And as a result, were a little harder for me to ignore. Now, just because I think it's going to be a little easier to see with this deck, I really like both of these equally. I think they're both beautiful decks. Because I'm a writer, and words are so important, I'm going to now zoom out, now that I zoomed in. Technology is really frustrating sometimes. Anyway, so you're not going to be able to see the keywords on these cards, but I'll tell you what they are. Anyway, because I'm a writer, I tend to look at words first. And so the thing that I've always disliked about keywords on cards is they feel like an imposition on tarot cards. And what I mean by that is it's very difficult for me to not get hung up on language, which is weirdly one reason why I think tarot is so important to me, because it's a language that isn't word-based. It's a language of, for some, images, for others, correspondences. I think for me, a collection of those things, kind of, in your tarot toolkit vein, right? Like, there are all these things that make up the deck. Whoops, sorry. Just actually going to turn this other light on now. I don't know why. There goes my microphone. Oh my god, I'm a fucking mess. Ugh, that did absolutely nothing. Whatever. So, tarot being a language that is more visual and less linguistic, to me, is really useful because it's easy, I guess, for me to get bogged down in meaning. So, in this spread, actually, I guess I do. So, we have the Ten of Cups, which in this deck is called satiety, which I take to mean fullness, being satiated. we've got the Nine of Swords, which in this deck is called Cruelty. The Three of Pentacles, Works. The Two of Swords, Peace. And the Six of Swords, Science. Now, these are not exactly the Golden Dawn keywords, as I remember them. Some of them are, some of them aren't. But it doesn't really matter, because what sticks with me is I see the word first and I can't get around it. So then what happens when decks have keywords is that they become like an oracle deck, where I'm focused on the word and not the language of tarot. So I look at a reading and I just can't help but see satiety. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. Satiety? You are satiated. And to me, that's not a cups feeling. Do you know what I mean? Like, satiety is a pentacles feeling, because it's fullness of food, of wine. You know what I mean? And I forget that the Ten of Cups has a purpose beyond what the creator of the deck said it means. Same thing with the Two of Swords as peace, or the Three of Pentacles as works. Now, the Three of Pentacles as works actually kind of works for me, because it is the suit of effort in that sense, and then or labor, if we're looking at it from like a class point of view. And then science as the Six of Swords doesn't really make all that much sense to me, but science would fit into swords, because of that sort of crisp, sharp, logical, scientific mind. In fact, I think that it makes sense a lot too, because science can be sometimes as fundamentalist as religion, especially today. So, we don't have space for nuance anymore, and I think we need it, but I think the Suit of Swords in many ways kind of typifies extremes sometimes. Anyway, so then what the reading becomes about is like satiety and working and peace and science, and I stop seeing the image on the card or the correspondences that I have to it. And I would notice it happening weirdly more with this tarot deck, the Voyager, because it actually is giving Oracle a little bit more than tarot, because of the kind of artwork that was chosen for it, and because of the keywords for the cards. These are a little more oracle-y keywords to me, although they are not something that oracles tend to do that I don't like, which is be all positive. What I had to do as a reader is kind of actively ignore the keywords in some cases and do what I recommend we always do when we're reading, which is to come back to the question and to then start teasing out contexts. Or if I don't have a question, start looking for things that seem relevant beyond the keywords. So, like in this case, in this spread, I didn't even shuffle this deck. These were like bottom 9 cards, So I'm drawn mostly by the Ten of Cups here with this called Satiety. But the way that I normally read this is with the center card. The center card in this specific video, again, please bear with me, I'm not feeling great. The Tower. So what I'm really reading about is a tower moment, Now, I can take a journey with the keyword if I want to. I think about the tower and, let's start. Like, satiety, okay. The Tower, to me, is a very sexual card. And so the Ten of Cups as satiety could become sexual fulfillment. And that's the thing that I would not normally consider necessarily with the Ten of Cups. I might, you know what I mean? Like, tens are endings, but satiety is a different kind of wholeness, a different kind of fullness, right? So this might just suggest an orgasm, because then there's the cups element of fluids. So then we get body fluids, the sensations. And I think when folks think about cups, often we think about emotions, but feeling, sensation is also part of that equation. And so, we could be starting off here with an orgasm. Or the completion of a sexual act, which is not always an orgasm, right? So then I start to look for context to sort of color that more. Now, why did I go there? I mean, it's just kind of the journey that the cards took me on. And I guess ultimately the big lesson for me is that the keywords, when I can ignore them, become as contextual as the images on the cards. So they are no more important or less important than the image or the numerology or the elements. But as a reader, I have to work harder to ignore the keyword because I am so cerebral verbally, and that makes it really difficult for me to escape the words, But in a way, I guess that's the struggle that all readers face, certainly beginner readers, when we are learning and we go to the guidebook and we, reach for the meanings that are assigned to it, and then the meanings don't seem to connect to the purpose of the spread. And an example I use all the time, because it's a reading I really remember, is, pulling the Eight of Wands and telling someone, oh, your relationships don't matter. What matters is getting your work out into your creativity out into the world. Because that's how I viewed wands back then. And the Eight of Wands just meant like sending out your submissions, going on auditions, sending out manuscripts, anything that was like getting your work into the world. But what I failed to understand back then was contextualizing that card in terms of relationships. And so we actually start with kind of a relationshipy beginning because I have this sort of sexual quality of these cards. But that may not be the question. Right now I don't have a question in this example, but, what if we did? There are actually, the moon is another card that's very sexual as well. And even you could say the Hanged Man certainly could represent some kinds of kink. So we go there, but then I have a lot of Pentacles cards, and I have a lot of Swords cards, so that colors the spread as well. And I have other keywords, so we have the Nine of Swords. So I'm getting on this journey here of, like, sex, right? This sort of orgasmic experience. But then we have the Princess or the Page of Pentacles here, and the Moon. And that is, like, okay, I don't have a keyword here that's changing things, but I do have a change in sort of genre, so to speak. The Princess of Pentacles kind of changes the vibe, or does it? You know what I mean? I don't know. So as we keep going, what I've noticed is that when I'm reading well, and I'm not putting too much pressure on myself, the keywords just become another kind of information, another data point that the card offers, but that may or may not be useful in the context of a reading. And so, cruelty as the Nine of Swords here, I view nines as a pretty unpleasant number in a lot of cases because they're tired, and the nines get a bad rap, and certainly the Nine of Swords is one of the cards we don't want to see in the Waite-Smith system. But again, like, contextually, even if I stick with cruelty, because I have a hard time not living with the keyword, like, it's very difficult for me to ignore the keywords, which is why I don't like them. It becomes a different kind of cruelty. So it becomes recontextualized into something, again, maybe kinkier. Again, why am I going that way? Because of the explosive nature of the Tower and the satiety of the Ten of Cups. And so maybe, again, with the Hanged Man being kind of a kinkster in this case, the Nine of Swords becomes S&M or something like it. And the Page of Pentacles then becomes someone who's dipping their toes into some kink. They're interested in it, but they're a little, they're maybe a little more down to earth than that community necessarily represents or welcomes or is considered. But they're interested, they're attracted to it. The moon attracts, it pulls. So we have this very practical person being pulled by this sort of kinkiness. And then the 6 becomes science here. Now that feels not at all useful to me. Science, nope. Right out of the gate, because what I get from 6 is beauty and thinking good thoughts, and so I get someone having really interesting fantasies, and then there's a little bit of a split, a divide in them in the Two of Swords, which is called peace, but again, that's not singing to me at all here. what I get is the tug of war of a 2. And the 3 of Pentacles is like, I'm kind of like a down-to-earth person, but I'm growing, and like I'm in kinkified now. And so as I take this journey with the cards, the keywords then just become another kind of context. And so that's the main lesson I guess I could have just gotten to the point with that I've learned through doing. And I think I always knew that, you know what I mean? But again, it's a level of work that I don't enjoy as much as just being able to lay out the cards and not have something telling me what they mean. Which is, again, why I frequently have said I prefer working with pip decks. Because the image isn't leading me anywhere. I like neutral decks. This deck, I find actually quite neutral. I find it exceptionally good. I adore this deck, and it will absolutely become part of my regular canon. I've always admired the artwork in it, and seeing it in my hands, seeing it up close, has been really lovely. So, I mean, I would say that the experiment was a success overall. It's easier, again, for me to think this way with Thothy decks because I know those keywords to some degree. With the Vision, the Voyager, rather, the keywords are a little modern. And in that way, I think, pose a different challenge, although not an unpleasant one, because this deck wants to do different things. You know what I mean? Like, it wants to approach the tarot from, as a quest, as a voyage. So James Wanless's goal is different than mine as a reader. But again, I still find that I can work with this deck quite well. And this, even though you might not think it, reminds me a lot of decks like the Margareta Peterson, because the artwork is so kind of image rich that you can't really absorb it at once, especially in the kinds of spreads that I tend to work with. The other thing that I actually think is really good about this deck is that the borders are very light and the keywords and the text are in white. So actually, they're a little easier for me to ignore. This is a really special tarot deck. There are days where I just am in love with it and days where it just doesn't feel like a tarot deck to me. It's weird. Some days it just feels a little more like an oracle. But I've had done some really good readings with it in the same way. The collage of this deck is thoughtful. They worked really hard on this, you know what I mean? And if you read his guidebooks, and there's a lot of books about this deck, you can see how much effort went into it. And there are some actually really interesting spreads, too. I as part of doing this, because it was such a slow month, I actually took James's class, which you can take asynchronously, on his website. It was on sale. It's a little expensive, but you get, a fair amount of information. And it was interesting to experience the deck through the creator's vision. In this deck, crystals are swords and worlds are coins. I'm used to, for some reason, associating crystals with earth. So that took a little getting used to. But this is also a deck where the courts have keywords too, which is not always the case. But it was the same, you know what I mean? The image, something in the image may strike me, the keyword may strike me, or my normal correspondences for the cards may strike me. But it all became of a piece. It just became another tool in the toolkit. And ultimately, I guess that's kind of, what the message here for me is. And, I've been so sort of down on keywords on cards, and it is a little extra step for me, I will admit. It takes a little bit extra work for me to sort of live with the keyword. But having done that, it's still kind of a good experience overall. So, I will keep both of these decks out. It was a success. I wish I had some sort of revolutionary thing to say about them. I don't. You know what I mean? It wasn't like a life-changing experiment, but it did make it possible for me to work with the cards that I wouldn't normally have worked with, and that I tend to avoid. Weirdly, when I read for myself, I actually tend almost universally to reach for decks with keywords on them. I don't know why. So, very strange. Oh, this bag is just from the Serpent and Peacock deck. I got that when I backed it. But it was like the only one that I had that fit this one. So yeah, I mean, you're 27 minutes into this video. Did you learn anything? I don't know. But I, just figured I would share, as I promised I would, how this went and what I thought afterwards. And it was interesting. It was a good experience. It definitely, I think, opened me up. I also think it's sort of interesting how these decks have very similar backs. Anyway, that was purely coincidental. Anyway, just another little rambly, bloggy video. Hope you enjoyed. Take care, be well, be good, and we'll talk soon.